Your coffee, sir.
Thanks, beautiful.
You're welcome.
The early 20th century was a time of sexism, especially in the sciences. But Rosalind Elsie Franklin, the adventurous, brilliant, pioneering X-ray crystallographer, stood up against it. The stand taken by Rosalind Franklin against society's sexist customs and stereotypes during the race to find the structure of DNA in the 1950s at King's College impacted science and sexism today. Franklin's work advanced scientific knowledge, and her Photo 51 was key to discovering the structure of DNA, which forever changed the scientific community. Rosalind Franklin also normalized female scientists and inspired others to be like her. Franklin was born in England to a wealthy Jewish family in 1920. In 1932, she went to St. Paul's Girls' School, where she began studying physical science and chemistry at the age of 15. Her mom, grandmother, and many of her aunts were stay-at-home moms, and she felt pressure from her family, especially her father, to be like them. Franklin stood up against them and left St. Paul's a year early to go to Newnham College, Cambridge, on a 4-year scholarship.
I entered medical school in 1962. Our medical class, our freshman medical class, had 208 students in it, and 4 of them were female, 4 women. Later in the 60s, when I ended up teaching, my introductory biology science classes were 90% men.
In 1942, she got a job at the British Coal Utilization Research Association. There, Franklin wrote her first scientific paper, Thermal Expansion of Coals. In the paper, she explains the properties of coal as they heat and expand. Her work helped create safer gas masks for World War II. In 1945, Franklin got a job at Laboratoire Centrale des Services Chimiques de l'Étude in Paris. She thrived in Paris. Here, her boss Jacques Meringue taught her X-ray crystallography, and she studied carbon compounds and graphite. Franklin wrote many papers explaining her various findings. After working here for many years, she said she had no career path in Paris. Franklin applied to King's College, where J.T. Randall wrote to her, asking if she would be interested in researching DNA. It now seems that it would be a good deal more important for you to investigate the structure of certain biological fibers in which we are interested. This means that as far as experimental X-ray effort is concerned, there will be at the moment only yourself and Gosling. The structure had not yet been discovered, and another person working at King's was Maurice Wilkins. He was also to be working on DNA, however the letter from Randall implied otherwise. This began the rivalry and dislike between Wilkins and Franklin.
Wilkins was shy and kept to himself. Along comes Rosalind Franklin, thinking she is going to do a particular job, also being rather reserved and wanting to get on with it. And they just did not mix from the word go.
Soon after she got to King's in 1951, Franklin learned that the senior common room was for men only. Like many other universities and labs, there were 2 common rooms, one for men only and the other for men and women. This was very different from her usual routine in her lab in France. Franklin was already disliking King's. After meeting her, Maurice Wilkins was surprised by her boldness and brusque manner. There was a tension between Wilkins and Franklin that eventually led to them never speaking to each other while both working on DNA in the same lab. Rosalind Franklin was extremely talented in taking photos using X-ray crystallography. J.D. Bernal, another crystallographer and later her boss, said Franklin's X-ray photos were among the most beautiful X-ray photographs of any substance ever taken. Working at high humidity, she took the first clear images of the separated A and B forms of DNA. The A form is the dry crystalline form, while the B form is wet and paracrystalline. Previous attempts to use X-ray diffraction for DNA blurred the two together, and scientists were unable to identify the structure. Her photos were key in finding the structure of DNA. Soon after, Wilkins suggested that he, Franklin, and a fellow scientist in their lab, Alex Stokes, should collaborate. Franklin lost her temper because Wilkins was trying to take credit and fame for her data. She had been in her lab in isolation and didn't need or want help from the man who was intruding in on her work. Now miserable at King's, Franklin wanted to leave as soon as possible. Meanwhile, James Watson and Francis Crick were also in the race to find the structure. They were working at Cavendish Lab and were the most determined to find the structure first. On May 2nd, unbeknownst to Rosalind Franklin, she had taken arguably the most important photo of the century. Photograph 51 showed that the structure of DNA was a double helix, seen by the distinct X shape within it showing a helix and the surrounding diamond shapes showing repetition. Franklin finally got out of her King's job after getting accepted to work at Birkbeck. Preparing to leave King's, Franklin wrote up all the lab work she did there. She explained the A and B forms in great detail. That work was unpublished, yet Watson got access to it. Her papers were going to be sent to the Medical Research Council, where Watson's friend, Max Perutz, worked, and he gave Franklin's papers to Watson. Her Photo 51 also got into Wilkins' hands, who showed it to Watson and Crick. Neither of these things happened with her consent or knowledge. Quoted from James Watson's book, Maurice went into the adjacent room to pick up a print of the new form they call the B structure. The instant I saw the picture, my mouth fell open and my pulse began to race. He also said, Rosie, of course, did not directly give us her data. For that matter, no one at King's realized they were in our hands. Franklin's Photo 51 was crucial to the discovery of DNA's helical structure. If Watson never saw the image, it is unlikely Watson and Crick would have been the ones to discover the structure of DNA. Meanwhile, with only her lab work, Franklin's manuscript, dated March 17, 1953, proved just how close she was to getting the solution. On April 25, 1953, Watson and Crick published their infamous article in Nature magazine, where they said that DNA was a double helix. James Watson, Francis Crick, and Maurice Wilkins later won the Nobel Prize for solving the structure in 1962. At Birkbeck, Franklin studied the tobacco mosaic virus with the best research team she'd ever worked with. Franklin and Klug worked especially well together, and she developed a close friendship with him and his family. The group took amazing pictures of the virus using X-ray crystallography and began creating a model. In 1956, after many stomach pains and a hesitant hospital visit, Franklin was diagnosed with ovarian cancer. Following many surgeries, including a hysterectomy, she died 2 years later on April 16, 1958, only 37 years old. The Nobel Prize cannot be awarded posthumously, and it was given to Watson, Crick, and Wilkins 4 years after she died. It is unknown who would have gotten the prize if she were alive then. 3 people is the maximum number to win, but her data was so impactful to their discovery. Franklin was not credited for her help in finding the structure until decades later. Momentarily, I wondered how Rosie would look if she took off her glasses and did something novel with her hair. In 1968, 10 years after Rosalind Franklin died, James Watson published his book, The Double Helix. He portrayed Franklin as a stupid, unattractive, hot-tempered assistant of Maurice Wilkins called Rosie. If only she could keep her emotions under control, there would be a good chance that she could really help Wilkins.
She didn't know how to deal with other people, didn't know how to ask for help, and was, if anything, probably paranoid about people stealing her data.
Being a female scientist was one stand after another. The wage gap in the 1950s, where women made 64 cents for every dollar a man made in the same profession, and the lower odds of women getting into the college Franklin went to, where 1 in every 10 was female. The stereotypes of women in the early 20th century, and the expectations for Franklin from her family and from society for her to be a stay-at-home mom.
I think the biggest stand she obviously took in that era was by not allowing herself to be intimidated by this dominant male old boys club. She not only didn't allow herself to be intimidated by that, but through her single-minded dedication and pursuit of the highest quality research, she ultimately made them see her as a scientist. I mean, that to me was her extraordinary accomplishment. Not see her as a woman scientist, see her as a scientist.
What if Franklin hadn't become a scientist? Her work showed properties of coal while heated and expanded, structures of carbon compounds and graphite formation, the form of the tobacco mosaic virus, and Watson and Crick most likely couldn't have solved DNA. It was her Photo 51 and her knowledge of the two forms that led to them realizing the structure. DNA is important for so many things in life. It can be used to track and cure genetic diseases, solve crimes, map family trees, and much more. Franklin's coal, carbon, and virus work also impacted the scientific community. Now, there is a university in Chicago named after her, to honor Dr. Franklin, whose uncompromising honesty and devotion to the highest standards of scientific research continues to inspire and guide our faculty, students, and alumni today. By being scientists, defying society's standards, Franklin and every other female scientist she worked with inspired a future generation of girls that they can be whatever they want to be. The 1950s showed an image of women being housewives, living to cook, clean, and take care of their kids. But the stand of Rosalind Elsie Franklin changed this.